this will be the best season of the Inside Sports Podcast.
Absolutely will.
That you guys will ever see.
New year, new Cole Daily.
Let me shoot off just like a bad one real quick. Welcome back. This is Cole. This is the Inside Sports Podcast with the DE cap. Can we change the name, by the way? We should probably change the name this year.
Of the Inside.
Yeah, we should.
You want to whip up a new name right now?
Not new name.
Not right now, but we'll figure it out.
We should. Do you think we should? Our name is so generic. Like, no one can find us.
Yeah, I'm not going to give any input.
I thought it
You wanna do
worked
you do it,
with
I
the
don't care.
Daily Egyptian branding on DE. It was fine.
No, it is good. It's a fine name. Welcome back to the Inside Sports Podcast with the DE capitalized. We're back. Cole.
Yeah.
Jordan. Joey. We're back. Okay. Starting now. Woo! Folks, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. We are so back. It's me, Cole Daly, now the editor-in-chief of the Daily Egyptian. Woo! I got to give myself a little pat on the shoulder for that one. Joey is now a graduate assistant, and Jay Cruz, he's still just, I don't know what he does. He's just around. That's kind of just his thing.
Here to give fiery takes.
He just kind of exists in the multiverse.
He exists. He travels in and out of it. Guys, this is the Inside Sports Podcast. Yes, the DE is capitalized for the first time of this new season. Let's go ahead and kick it off with Dogs at the Vet. Let's check up on our Saluki teams. Right now, soccer just came off of a tie with Kansas City and a loss to SEMO. Not the team that we saw from last year. It's a little unfortunate. We had things coming up, and now looks like it's going back a little bit on a downturn. We're 1-2-1 right now. And then we have road trips coming up at SIUE on Thursday. This will be released on Wednesday. We release every Wednesday, folks. No?
Probably not this week.
This
week it'll be Thursday and Friday.
Okay. So how does the team look? Right now, it's an interesting time period for the women's soccer team. Joey, what have been your thoughts on coming up this early season?
Well, I've only been to the one game this year, this past Sunday, when they played SEMO, and needless to say, if you were to go to one game this year for SIU soccer, that would not be it. I think we only registered one shot on goal, so that was very, very rough to start our war for the wheel for the year, but oh my goodness, I think we need to figure out the goalie situation. We need to have like a clear number one, number two.
Is it Ari or is it Chantel?
Chantel was the goalie on Sunday, but I think Ari was the goalie against Kansas City when we tied. So it's just been an interesting situation there, trying to figure that out. But we still have time until the conference season starts, of course. Just like all these teams that are just starting up the season, we're going to have a little adjustment period until conference play gets started. And like I mentioned, with only one shot on goal, I'm just concerned with the offense just in general. I was kind of playing a game with a friend when I was at the SIU soccer game about how long can SIU actually retain the ball. And I don't think they retain the ball for more than a minute at a time. So that was just a pretty interesting game to actually go to. I don't mean to roast this team because I think they have a lot of talent. But it's just an adjustment period with the third head coach in 3 different seasons.
It's tough. It's hard for anybody to recover from that, right? I mean, Jay Cruz, tell us, how are these girls probably feeling on the sideline?
Well, there's a lot of new freshmen as well, too. And with that, and the 3 new coaches in 3 years, and the thing is it's widely known that a lot of these coaching changes have been controversial. Mm-hmm. It's not like they had a great season and the coach just took a better job. I mean, these coaches are leaving for reasons not soccer related, and so for any new coaches, especially this year, it's an adjustment not only for them but for the players as well. And you just kind of have to feel for them, like you guys were saying. And this is something we'll get into a little bit later with quarterback controversies across the country. But when you have a goalie controversy in soccer, when your offense is already struggling,
roughly halfway in the season, mind you. We still haven't figured it out. 4
games in by the time we're recording this today. It's tough. It's really, really tough. And again, coming off the season like they did last year, it was the best one that they'd had in the program's history. But of course, then you had that controversy in the middle of the season, and things just kind of
went off a downhill.
So you want to avoid that downhill slope this season because, given the way the team looks right now, I'm not sure if they'll be able to recover from that.
I can see that. And so then we move on to volleyball. Volleyball has also started off 2 wins to start the year. They won in 4 sets over Central Michigan and then also 4 sets over SEMO. So take that one. What is it? Glorified D2 college? I mean, I can't even tell.
What's a Red Hawk?
Yeah, that's right.
Red
Right?
Hawk.
Like, what even is a Red Hawk?
Never seen one in my life.
Go Dogs. Woof woof. Anyways, we got a couple players coming back from injury. Cece Bowman and Nasia Gittens are making their return to injury. Now, Cece was one of our best players before she went down, and Nasia, am I saying that name right?
Nisi.
Nisi. It's my fault.
Yeah, there's no I, but it's Nisi.
Okay, my fault. Nisia. She's one of the most vocal players on the team. I did an interview with her, and she's just a great, awesome leader, so we're happy to have both of them back, which is probably why we won in 4 sets. I think that out of all the SIU sports, I'm most excited to see what the SIU women's volleyball team does, because they have a lot of returning players, they have a lot of really, really impressive talent. Joey, tell me what you've seen from these first couple of games.
Yeah, I think you took the words right out of my mouth. Being so excited about this team that there wasn't a lot of turnaround. I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not, but Bailey Newberger is the only one that will not be playing for the team this year, although she's staying with us as a graduate assistant.
Yes, and she's a beloved player, too. I mean, all the girls on the team, they're all friends with her, right?
So that gains more chemistry with the team and everything.
Mhm.
But, I mean, some of the best players from last year are still here this year. So, I mean, why not make a run for it? Also, I do want to mention Ed Allen. He's been kind of here for a while. I think he hasn't had quite a breakout year where it's been like, oh, man, he's this really good coach that we need to, like, keep for many, many years. I think this could be the year where he shows that. Coming from Alabama a couple years back, this could be his breakout year as head coach for this team, I feel like.
I'm really excited for that. And Jay Cruz, give me your thoughts on what you've seen out of the team this year. I mean, do you think that this may be the year it all comes together for them?
I mean, it kind of has to be, because they have a lot more seniors this year than they did last year. Natalie Garcia in particular, who's been all MVC everything the last couple of years. Anna Jaworski's now.
Tatum Tornado still on the team?
Tornado as well. And we saw, even though we had a loaded roster last year and they're pretty much all back, CC's injury had a huge impact on this team. And we kind of saw that those two things correlated with each other. And they started to lose a little bit more games against not great teams toward the end of the season because of it. But like you said, this is the year. It does all have to come together. There's not really that many excuses anymore. You had your best season in so many years last year. Now they're all back, a lot of your core players at least. So it's now or never. And I think Ed Allen's the guy who's going to get it done for them.
Do we know what Cece's injury was? Was it an ACL?
I believe it was a torn ACL, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. I think you're right.
I just want to also bring up how is that going to affect her play in any ways? I mean, it's not an easy task coming off a torn ACL. So.
It certainly isn't. It might affect her jumping ability, being a middle hitter. But I think that for the most part, she should come back pretty well. She had a long time to recover, right? The off season plus going into some of last season. I think that I think the coaching staff has got it right.
Maybe one of these pods we could ask her ourselves.
Yeah, maybe.
That'd be great.
You never
and
know.
it showed throughout the rest of the season. After she did get hurt, she stayed with the team. She was always supporting everybody.
Right.
And
Yes.
I think when you have this core group of players that all come back, they're there to rally around you and motivate you to get back on your feet. I'm sure all of them at some point have experienced some sort of injury, right? Now, maybe not as extreme as a torn ACL, but they've all had some sort of adversity that they've had to fight through, whether that be even like being on the teams from a couple of years ago who were losing a lot more games. So to have the turnaround that they did last year, I don't see a way that they don't sustain that at least a little bit. So, like I said, I'm really excited to see this team get back out on the court, continue to rock Davies Gym this year.
Absolutely. We're super excited for that. And then also, we're very, very excited about this year's SIU football program. So last year, we're coming off a 5-6 season. For me, as a freshman, we played absolutely amazing. We had a little downturn towards the end of the year, right? But then we come back, we make the playoff, we compete well. We ended up losing to North Dakota State, I believe, that year, and nobody can really blame us on that one. Last year was the most roller coaster football year that I've seen in a very, very long time. There were some of the highest highs and some of the lowest lows. And so we have our upcoming game against Austin Peay at home. Really, really excited for it. Joey, what do we think of this year's team? What can we expect?
Yeah, last year we just ended on such a really distasteful note in general. We lost 4 fourth quarter leads in a row to end the year. And, I mean, we were in a period, I think we were 5-2 at that point. We were in a period where we were like, okay, where are we going to end up at the playoffs? Because we're playing some teams like, I think it was South Dakota.
We might play both.
We played regular South Dakota.
Okay.
We played them on the road,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where the 4-game losing streak ended last year. I just think this can be, this at least specifically this first game could be a way to just get that taste out of our mouths from the end of last season. I do want to mention we have a lot less. I don't want to say a lot, but we have less veteran starters this year, veteran players this year.
Absolutely.
Not as many as what I originally thought before I even looked at the roster, but I don't want to even put it into a question about veteran leadership, but I guess in my head that's just what I'm thinking about heading into this next season. Specifically also in the secondary, we had a lot of veteran guys leave from last year. Just
You
want
could
to
tell.
know how that's
You
gonna,
could tell that last year.
You could really tell that last
But
year.
maybe that they've got that kind of some seasoning under
It's okay.
their belt. I couldn't think of.
There's the season vets.
Now that they have a season under their belt, they may be more adjusted to the game properly. They may be better, but it's a tough thing though. You got to handle.
Right. Also, just one thing I wanted to note. I feel like nobody's talking about it, but we lost our defensive coordinator the day before training camp started.
Yeah.
How is that going to play just on our player? Were they gearing so much for DJ's game plan before the training camp started, and then all of a sudden, whoop, that's out of the window? Gosh, I want to. What's our new defensive coordinator's name?
Antonio James.
Antonio James.
Mm-hmm.
He was already an assistant with us this past year. So I wonder if a lot of it is going to be familiar stuff to not complicate the guys, but is that going to be a bad thing? Is that going to lower the intensity of play since it's already stuff that they have done before? I don't,
He's taken. It's an incredibly hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Is to come in and come up with your own defensive scheme the day before training camp. I mean, DJ Vokalek, thanks a lot, really. I mean, you leave us in a very, very, very tough position, and since he was a coach here, best of wishes to him. But at the same time, that we're in a very, very complicated scenario, especially on the defensive side, which, as you stressed last year, wasn't exactly our strongest point.
No. And he went to Northwestern, and needless to say, things haven't been going very well there.
No,
So it's
not at
really-
all.
That's not really the place I'd want to be right now. Now, granted, he left before all that, but of course, he's probably maybe rethinking his decision a little bit. But we're moving on to the season, and like you guys mentioned, because of the COVID year and red shirts. I mean, some of these guys are in their 6th and 7th years, but a lot of the guys from last year have left. Last year's team, we thought at least, was probably the most talented team that we've had here in 3 or 4 years, and look how they did. Now that some of those key guys are gone, I don't know. I'm a little nervous for this season. I'll just say that, and of course, with the defensive coaching change, kind of at the last second there, I'm a little nervous. And I think Nick Baker's great. One thing I would like to see this season is continuing to get the ball into the hands of guys who are our talented playmakers, like Deontay Cox, for example. In my opinion, and I'm not a football expert, not a football X's and O's guy, in my opinion, there were too many games where in the big moments we weren't trying to get the ball in the hands of Avante and Deontay, the twins. I mean, they're really, really good for a reason. Avante got invited to camp with the Ravens for a reason. Javonte Williams as well. Or not Javonte.
Javon
Williams.
Javon
sorry.
Williams Jr.
Javon Williams Jr. Like, there's a reason like these guys are being looked at the way that they are. And to me, I just didn't understand it sometimes. And Nick Baker's good enough to get them the ball too, so I don't really understand it.
It really is.
And maybe it's because the defense, I haven't watched the film, so maybe the defenses are just lining up in a certain formation that just makes it less appealing to throw their way, maybe. But that would be my key for this season. You really have to rely on guys like that. I expect to see a lot of double-digit catch games for Deontay this year. I really do. If the team is to be successful, because that's what I think it's going to take.
It really is. It's going to be tough because not only it's interesting because we have a lot of defensive players returning, and yet we lost our defensive coordinator. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, Nick Hill's been running that for every year since he's been here, for the most part.
Yeah.
And of course with the offensive coordinator. That being said, we lost a lot of talent last year, as you mentioned. Avante, Javon. I mean, we're going to have people fill in for these roles. Justin Strong was hurt almost all of last year, and so he's probably a little bit rusty. I mean, he was a really, really good back, but that's just how things go in football.
You were talking about playmakers. I was going to mention Justin Strong. He missed 5 games last year total out of the 11. We also are getting Isaiah Hartrip back.
Yeah, huge.
He was gone all last season. So I think those two in particular are going to have to step up their game take the weight off of Deontay on the offense this year, and Nick Baker, of course, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really, really important. And so, all right, well, that concludes our checkup. Folks, you can see it. We've been working diligently. We've been working very hard for this podcast. And in us working so hard, we actually couldn't get anybody for Saluki Space this week. But don't worry. They're coming back. You want to talk to the athletes, we'll get that for you. But at the same time, folks, I know you've been waiting for the Told You So segment. And let me tell you, we're back. All right? We are back. Folks, you may be wondering, what's with the new setup? Folks, it's season 2. Things change in different seasons. And folks, as you may have saw, we got a whiteboard now. And that means it's my time to get chatty. So folks, let me introduce your preview for the college football season. Everyone, what's all this stuff on the board? And first, we'll get to that. We're going to go with the college football playoff. You folks at home, you're going, what's Cole's picks? Who does he think's going to win? Guys, I'll tell you what. Number 1 seed. We've got it right here. UGA. Georgia. They're not slowing down. There's rumors Carson Beck is even better than Stetson Bennett was a year ago. Yeah. Purely from talent-wise, we know that Stetson Bennett was in that system for a long time. But, guys, they got the best coach. They've got the best staff. They've got the best players. There's nothing that can slow them down. There's been talks of Alabama. If Alabama had a competent quarterback, or at least one that I believed in right now, and Tyler Buckner is not that guy, then I would be having that. Jay Cruz, what's your thought on me putting them number 1?
For me at least, this year seems like a Georgia and everyone else kind of year in the SEC. Every other SEC team, particularly at the top, Tennessee, Bama, LSU, there are major flaws on those teams. And so I think UGA at number 1 is probably the safest bet in America right now.
Alrighty. Now the only thing, like you mentioned, it's UGA versus the world. The only way that I could see, the only other team that I could see becoming number 1 is who I'm going to put at number 2. Now Jay Cruz, try not to lose yourself. We're going University of Michigan. They got too many returning guys. They've got quite possibly Jim Harbaugh's last year. This is the make it or break it year. Yeah. In my personal opinion, this is Jim Harbaugh's last year with the program. The only thing is, University of Michigan has a pretty tough schedule when you think of them playing Ohio State and Penn State, 2 very, very good teams. And so I think that this could be the year that it all comes together for the Big Ten squad. I really think that it's just Blake Cornum, Donovan Edwards, J.J. McCarthy. Who's that tight end? Is Eric All still there, or who's the tight end who's backing him up?
Oh gosh, I know this. Colston Loveland.
Colston Loveland, yeah, that's his name.
Eric All transferred to Iowa.
Oh, he did, didn't he? He did, yes, because they're buddies. But Loveland's still awesome. Yeah. And then their defense, their offensive line. There's so much to love about this team. Yeah. If there's one team that can knock off Georgia, it would be them.
Yeah. The only thing that concerns me with these 2 teams, it's not really a football thing. It's just complacency and keeping engaged, because both of these teams do have some sneaky games that they can fumble up on, and they both had games like that last year. Georgia probably should have lost to Missouri.
Right.
I mean, Missouri led 90% of that game, and Michigan needed a game-winning field goal to beat Illinois last year.
Right.
Illinois, again, another game that Illinois probably should have won had there not been a terrible non-offensive pass interference call. Anyway, but outside of that, these 2 teams on paper, there's no reason they shouldn't get there.
Yes.
In my opinion.
Absolutely. Now we have the 3 spot. Who's going to be playing Michigan? This one's tough. This one hurts. I love the ACC this year. Got some rising teams, and Duke, Pitt's going to have a resurgence, all these things. But there's 2 juggernauts. Clemson, Florida State. We're turning the clock back to 2012, 2013, 2014 here. Mm-hmm. And for me, I have Clemson. Now, I love this year's Florida State team. Jordan Travis and Johnny Wilson might be one of the best quarterback-wide receiver duos. Go ahead and throw Keon Coleman in there. Why not? He's also an awesome wideout. Do they have Trey Benson in at running back still? I believe they do.
That's Florida State. Wait, you're talking about Florida State. Sorry.
Yeah.
I got it.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah.
Cut it out if I don't know if that makes sense.
I'll leave it.
Okay. Anyways. But that being said, Clemson's built for this. Cade Klubnik, I think, is a better quarterback than DJ Uyunglele. Will Shipley, I mean, come on. Talk about Will Shipley versus Trey Benson. That's something that you don't really talk about a whole lot, but Will Shipley has that dog in him. I think we're going to see FSU versus Clemson in the ACC championship game, and I think the winner goes to the game. I dropped my marker, folks. Let me pick that up real quick. I think what happens is Clemson ends up winning because Mike Norvell does not have a great record against top opponents.
No,
He does not at all. He beat LSU last year, but that was kind of a miracle game, and they shouldn't have even been in that position in the first place. I have Clemson as my number 3 seed. Some of you may be wondering, why don't I have Texas? Well, folks, let me show you. I actually have the University of Washington in the 4 seed. Some people have been projecting Texas coming up on the boards. I don't see it. I think we might be a year away from making the college football playoff. I think we see a year of improvement. Jay Cruz, do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, I love Texas, but I do admire your ability to take your fan glasses off and see the reality, which is Texas always finds a way to screw itself. And UW is interesting. The Pac-12 is interesting. I mean, you could make a case for probably 3 or 4 teams in that conference to win it, right?
That's right.
UW is certainly one of them. Michael Penix Jr., their 2 top receivers coming back, McClellan and Romeo Dunze. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with for sure. I don't know if I'd pick them to go to the playoff, but I think that world exists.
I think this is my dark horse pick. This is I'm throwing it against the wall.
Yeah.
We're going to see what sticks.
Yeah.
And because of that, we're going to go into my Heisman favorites, folks. And that's why I have number 1 in my universe that I see things turning out. I have Michael Penix Jr., quarterback for Washington. I think that some really big games against tough teams like USC, Oregon State, right? You're going to get credit for winning those games. And if Penix can pull it out with the offense that he has behind Kalen DeBoer, is that how you say it? DeBoer at Washington. I mean, they showed it last year, and then they got a lot of returning pieces. I think that people are really underestimating University of Washington this year. I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. Granted, they're like Texas. They're very, very similar. Things can go way up or things can fall down. And because of that, that's why I have my number 2. If he puts it together, folks, the quarterback for the Texas Longhorns, Quinn Ewers, if you can see that right there up on the board. Quarterback for Texas. He was one of the best ranked recruits. He's cut the mullet. He's gotten serious. It's time to play. Show it. Cut that. That's bad. What is it? I can't. This is a make it.
Put up or shut up?
Yes. Put up or shut up for Quinn Ewers. Now he's got a lot of noise behind him. There's been talks of Malik Murphy. There's been talks of Arch Manning, new Texas quarterback. I called that on this pod, by the way. You guys said, oh, it's Alabama, it's going to be Georgia. Nope. It was Texas. I was right. He's going to have to put up. The good news is for Texas is if he doesn't, Arch Manning, there's been talks that Arch Manning's been picking up the system real quick, and we'll have to see how that all goes. My third Heisman, once again, guys, you can tell I love the dark horse. I might go a little crazy here. I'm going to put Brock Bowers, tight end. Might be the first tight end to ever win the award if it came true. But tell me why not? Georgia's got a great offense. It's going to be built around him. They might run him at freaking running back for all I care. He's probably going to score he's going to maybe score the most touchdowns in the country behind Marvin Harrison. And if his team blows everybody out like we all think they do, I mean, you're not going to give the credit to Carson Beck. You've got to give it to the guy that he's going to be giving the ball to almost all the time. And I think that Brock Bowers has a real chance to make history here. Think about that Kyle Pitts season. There were real talks about him. Didn't he finish 4th or 5th in Heisman voting?
Yeah.
That's wild.
Drafted 4th overall in the NFL drafts.
Right? And so we're going to see a very, very similar year like that with Brock Bowers. Jay Cruz, so far, I mean, let me know. What do you think of my playoff and what do you think of my Heisman picks?
We'll talk about Florida State a little bit later with your picks and the segment I was going to bring up. But I think if Quinn Ewers is second in the Heisman voting, I do think Texas will make the playoff. Because I feel like there's no way they don't if he's that good.
That's true.
If he's good enough to be second, then I think that'll translate to Texas being good as well.
I think that's what the Heisman translates to, because in a year where Caleb Williams is going to dominate, right?
Yeah.
He's too good. But that guy, whatever this team is that sneaks in, they have the guy that's most likely to win the Heisman. And so that's why I either have Texas sneaking in or I have Washington. I decided on Washington because Texas, guys, they always find a way.
They always do.
They always find a way. And so that leads us to week 1. Who else is excited? I know. Oh my gosh,
Waiting all offseason.
I cannot wait at all.
It's the longest wait of any sport.
It really is.
Like 8 months.
It feels
Months of
forever.
nothingness.
The transfer portal's fun, but that's like, it seems like it's over soon.
Yes.
The draft kind of keeps us interested in it, but no, this is. Anyways, so that leads us to week 1. UNC versus South Carolina. So let's break down these two teams. Jay Cruz, you tell me about UNC. I'll tell you a little bit about South Carolina. Let's do that.
Yeah, so UNC, they did not make any coordinator changes from last year, which is kind of surprising given how awful their defense was last year. I honestly don't see it being any better. I'm really concerned for them in this game. Drake May is fantastic. I really love him as a quarterback. He's probably going to go top 10 in the NFL draft for sure. But they also lost Josh Downs at wide receiver. Got a couple transfers, which is good. That's one really good thing about the transfer portal is some teams, if you have that quarterback, you can find a way to keep a good team around him for that extra year that they're going to get out of him now. So that's what I think about North Carolina.
That's right. And they're favored in this game against South Carolina. South Carolina brings in, I think he's a senior. I think he's officially a senior now. Spencer Rattler, right? He was a guy that was talked about as the number 1 pick and then never became that guy. But South Carolina also has a lot of other pieces. They got a great coach. I absolutely love their coach now. And so that is why in a neutral site game, I believe it's the Duke's Mayo Bowl is where they're going to be playing the game. I'm going to go with the underdog, South Carolina. I think they pull off the upset of UNC. I think UNC is a little overrated right now because of Drake May. Yeah. But nevertheless, I think South Carolina just has those guys. It's SEC versus ACC. Usually, gun to your head, you pick the SEC team. Next, we have Coastal Carolina at UCLA. And I'll go ahead and talk about Coastal Carolina right now because they've been a favorite of mine for a while. My problem with them is Jamie Chadwell, very, very good coach. I believe he was the AP Coach of the Year a couple of years ago, taking this absolutely random Coastal Carolina team and making them very, very prominent. They've had this quarterback, Grayson McCall, who's been there for forever. He is Mr. Solid. He is exactly what you want out of a college quarterback. I don't know how well it's going to translate to the NFL, but for the college level, he does a great, great job of managing himself. Coastal Carolina's got a good team. It's pretty loaded for the Sun Belt, but they're going to be facing a big-time opponent in UCLA, and I want to hear your take on what they have this year under Chip Kelly.
Yeah, UCLA is a pretty interesting team this year. I've seen some people say they might go 7-5, 6-6, but then on the other side, I see people say that they're going to make the Pac-12 championship. I think a lot of that is dependent on how the quarterback situation unfolds.
That's right.
Dante Moore, Ethan Garber. It's probably going to be Garber's for week 1. Just test it out, and it's basically his job to lose, but I think he'll probably have a short leash given that Dante Moore is right there.
And there's that Kent State transfer, Colin Schlee, who's been talked about a lot.
Absolutely. And then one of the more underrated transfer portal transactions done like that this year was Carson Steele from Ball State going to UCLA. That dude just runs.
Absolutely.
He bulldozes people over. They had Zach Charbonnet last year. I don't think they're going to skip a beat. I think they're going to have a great running game yet again. Now, I do have a stat for this game.
I love it.
UCLA, since Chip Kelly's gotten there, they're only 4-9 against the spread in non-conference games, and they're about a 2-touchdown favorite in this one. So, which kind of surprised me because since Jamie Chadwell moved on, I thought that Coastal Carolina probably wouldn't be favored very much by the public, but they are. And so this is probably going to be a really, really good game, which is why you have it up here.
Absolutely.
I would still pick UCLA, and I think you will too, but it should be really, really fun to watch Grayson McCall in an empty Rose Bowl.
Folks, Jay Cruz did predict it correctly. I am going to go ahead and pick UCLA. I think that UCLA under Chip Kelly, I love Carson Steele. Like you talked about, I think Garbers has got it. You know, he may not be the best quarterback in the world. They do have people waiting in line for if he does ever mess up. But I think he's certainly most adequate enough to beat Coastal Carolina, as what you talked about, Jamie Chadwell leaving for Liberty. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pick UCLA. This next game here, we're going to save this one. I want to go down one.
Sure.
Because these are date-oriented, folks. This takes place on Sunday. This takes place on Monday. But we got to save the best for last. And so we're going to go ahead and pick Clemson at Duke. Now, it's at Duke, which is pretty surprising. Usually it's a neutral site. But seeing this as in conference, it's not too surprising. Kind of the battle of the Carolina private schools.
Yeah.
You go ahead and talk about Clemson because I want to give my take on Duke football, which I follow fairly closely.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously love Clemson heading into this year. I do not feel the same way. I actually feel better about the team above them right over there. But they still are incredibly talented, basically everywhere. Now, is that talent going to translate? We don't know. They did just pick up Garrett Riley as their new offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
That might help. I think it will help. I think they'll be a little bit better.
That's a very large reason why I have them in the playoff.
For whatever reason, DJ just didn't fit in that system. And whenever Cade Klubnik came in, he wasn't fantastic all the time, but it seemed like he understood what that system was asking.
They could not have brought back the offensive coordinator from last year. I feel bad for DJ Uiagalelei.
So now they bring in Garrett Riley, who you saw what he did last year with TCU. They were the most talented team, but against a really good Michigan defense, they found a way to move the ball really, really well. So I like Clemson as a team this year, even with all the change that's happened, even with these down last couple of years.
I completely agree, and I think we're going to see a resurgence of Clemson. Obviously, we can see that I have them back in my playoff. That being said, I'm not fully confident in it. I think that there's a real chance that Duke comes away with an upset. I'm a big Dookie. I think that they're on the come up. I think Mike Elko was a great hire 2 years ago. And their quarterback, people haven't been talking about him a whole lot. And I don't think he's necessarily first-round discussion worthy, but people don't understand that this guy might be round 2. Riley Leonard, the quarterback for Duke. Riley Leonard really shows a whole lot. He's pretty mobile. He's almost like Drake May 0.5. And Drake May is absolutely unbelievable, but people really underestimate this kid. I think there's a real chance that Duke upsets Clemson. That being said, I mean, it's Dabo, it's week 1, it's Cade Klubnik. There's just too much talent on this roster, so I'm going to go ahead and Clemson. Any idea what the spread is in that game?
I believe Clemson is also like a 2-touchdown favorite. I believe it is 13.5.
That might be one to watch, folks. That's all I'll say. For those above 21 at home, you might want to keep your eyes on that one. And so finally, we have LSU versus FSU. The game of the week. I mean, both teams are top 10 ranked. We expect a lot of the both. This is kind of a make-it-break-it game for both of these teams. This is kind of the problem you run into when you're a top program hoping to compete for a playoff. But if you lose this game, week 1, you're in a tricky situation. I've been I don't know, I can't make up my mind yet. This mind is going to be made up on the pod live. You've seen me do it before, folks. Sometimes it goes very, very well. Sometimes it goes very, very poorly. Let's talk a little bit about, we talked a little bit about FSU, but give us just a slight overview. I know you're going to talk about them later. Just give us a slight overview of, what you think of this year's team.
To me, the difference in them making that level up from last year to this year, which again, people act like they had this fantastic season last year. When you compare past Florida State seasons, particularly the Willie Taggart era, yeah, it was amazing. But they still lost to Wake Forest. They still lost to NC State, 2 teams that weren't very good last year overall. Now, they got Keon Coleman from Michigan State, the transfer portal. Baller. I think he'll end up having the most receptions and yards on the team, even more than Johnny Wilson, which I know sounds crazy. But I think he'll end up being their leading receiver, and they also got Jaheim Bell from South Carolina. Fantastic tight end.
That's right.
I'm kind of surprised he transferred, honestly, because they have a really good thing going there for South Carolina. But to me, that offense is going to be so much better than last year, to a point where I think they'll make the playoff. And so, yeah, I'm really, really high on the Noles this year. Before we get into LSU, I have a stat about them as well. And I have no idea who you're going to pick. We didn't, like you said, you're making it up right now. We have not talked about this at all. Brian Kelly, now they are favored in this game by like 2.5. Brian Kelly covers spreads over 50% of the time when it comes to, and sometimes it's way over 50%, when it comes to playing ranked opponents and when they play at a neutral site and as a favorite. All those 3 fit in this scenario. So the stats are behind Brian Kelly in this one, but I'm picking FSU, so I'm going against my own thing here.
For me, for LSU, it's the absolute game wrecker on the other side, Harold Perkins. A pretty good LSU defense. They're also getting back some player who got injured. Oh my gosh, I wish I remembered his name right now. It might be. He was number 0 last year. He got injured in the FSU game last year. He missed the entire year, but he was awesome. It's something Mason? Forget it, folks. That's bad research on our part. I do apologize. Nevertheless, he was a very impactful defensive player. I can't think of his name right now. I don't love Jane Daniels. There's been rumors that Nussmeier might even be the best quarterback in the quarterback room, but they want to give it to Daniels. Him being number 2 in the Heisman odds is actually ridiculous, by the way. We haven't talked about that. This guy, early in the season last year, was a one-read-and-go type of guy. Yeah. Now, we're probably not going to see that same version of this year, because last year's game, Jane Daniels was embarrassing against Florida State. Florida State also has a guy off the edge, Jared Verse, that you could see it going one way. Because of this, I'm going to go with continuity. I'm going to go with pure talent that I see. It might be wild, but I think I want to go with the underdog. I'm an underdog man at heart. I'm going to go Florida State, strictly because, LSU, I don't believe in Jane Daniels. I don't believe they have the offensive firepower. They do have Malik Neighbors. I know he's really, really good, but I think FSU just wins. I think Jordan Travis made some real improvements last year. He could be competing for a Heisman himself. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Florida State. So, folks, at home, we have South Carolina over UNC, UCLA over Coastal Carolina, Florida State over LSU, and Clemson over Duke. Guys, it's a packed week 1. You have to be watching. And because of this, I want to talk to Jay Cruz about what do you think the college football season will bring us this year in terms of the teams that maybe we should, what do you call it? Go ahead and tell the folks at home.
There are certain teams this year, and these teams fit a category. I've divided it into teams that are currently ranked in the top 15 in the preseason poll, but they don't normally find themselves there. Like in the last decade, rarely have they ever been ranked in a preseason top 15 poll. Last year, there was a lot of teams that fit this criteria. It was Texas A&M. How'd they do? Awful.
Awful.
Utah, yeah, they were a top 15 team, but they lost 4 games. Baylor, unranked 6-7. Remember Cole Daly said Blake Shapen is that guy.
One of my coldest takes.
Oklahoma State, they started off really, really hot, and they fell apart toward the end.
Mm-hmm.
They went unranked 7-6. NC State was in the top 15 last
I was
year.
so
They were
high on
ranked
NC
13.
State. I was so high on NC State last year.
Then, now,
they
part
fell
of this was
apart.
because Devin Leary got hurt, but he played against Clemson. They didn't look like they matched up well against them at all. They finished unranked 8-5. And finally, the team that started number 15 last year was Michigan State.
That one was blasphemous.
Also finished unranked. So, let's see, there's 6 teams here on this list. 5 of them finished unranked. And they were preseason top 15.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a few. Now, there's less teams this year. I took Utah. I didn't include them this year because I think they've proven that they kind of belong around.
As long as Cam Rising is healthy, I completely
Yeah.
agree with you.
So this year, there's 4 teams that fit that category. One's a team we've talked about a lot, Florida State. They haven't been anything basically since like 2016 when Dalvin Cook was there. Shout out to, who's he on? He's on the
Shout
Jets
out
now.
the Jets.
He's on the Jets now, which is
Shout out the New York Jets.
But yeah,
I know you're
Dalvin
watching
Cook-
at home, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Florida State, they are number 8 to start the season.
Mm-hmm.
And again, one thing with the LSU game too, LSU secondary is terrible.
They are.
For me, that's the main reason. And
Keon
they tried
Coleman.
to fix it in the transfer portal, but Florida State's weapons are so good. Now, are you going to pump the brakes on these teams? Because that's what this is really about. Because these are a lot of teams that are getting a lot of hype. But I'm telling people that maybe they should pump the brakes. When you pump the brakes, that doesn't mean you have to stop. But just pump. Think about it. See where we go from there. Florida State, cool. Are you pumping the brakes and thinking about it a little bit more, or are you going to floor it with Florida State?
I'm pumping the brakes. I know I picked them in this game over LSU. That being said, I could see it going the opposite way.
Yeah.
That being said, they're going to have to play Clemson most likely twice. This is a team that a lot of people are talking about making the playoff. I think we should slow down.
Yeah.
I think there's a high chance they make a New Year's Six bowl. But that being said, when you play a schedule like they do, where if they lose this LSU game, you're telling me they're not heading into week 4 questionable against a pretty tough Pittsburgh team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of these teams that have a better defense, more solid on the secondary. I think that this season could get derailed. I don't think they're foolproof, as some people are talking about them.
So do you think they'll finish as a top 15 team, though?
Finish as a top 15 team is interesting because they have the talent level, and Mike Norvell showed something last year.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say they don't. Nah, they do.
Okay.
They do. They
Okay,
do.
okay.
They do. They do.
All right, next team. You don't really have to answer this. Washington, you're flooring it with them.
I'm flooring it.
You're having them make the playoff.
Flooring it. Michael Penix.
Yeah. Not too much
Rome,
else.
how do you say it? Rome Odunze?
Romeo Dunze. Yes.
Rome Odunze, probably my favorite wide receiver outside of Marvin Harrison in the country, or at least I believe them to be the best.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and floor it on this team. I think they got to make it in the playoff. They got the Heisman winner. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better for Washington, to be honest.
Are you going to floor it with your favorite team, the Texas Longhorns?
Texas Longhorns.
Now, floor it doesn't necessarily mean they have to make the playoff.
I understand.
Don't predict them to, but are you
We're just
gonna
talking about
pump
improvements.
the brakes?
If we're talking strictly improvements, I'm flooring it. I
Yeah.
think this is the year it comes together. I think this is Sark's real first year. They talk about first years for a lot of these guys, and whether it be the transfer portal or not, there's not really a first year for football. because players stay. It's so hard to keep up. I think this is this is his team right here. A lot of these guys he's recruited. He's got them to their school. I think that I'm really happy with where Sark has us. We might slip up once or twice, but I'm going to floor it. I think that we finish with 9 or 10 wins.
Interesting. And on this list, to me, the final team, probably the most polarizing team in the nation. They had their best season in probably 25 years last year.
Absolutely.
The Tennessee Volunteers. The Tennessee Volunteers returned Joe Milton, the quarterback, who looked pretty good in a couple of games that he got the start, right? Did he or did he not?
He looked all right.
He looked
in
pretty good.
that game against
All things
Clemson, he
considered.
looked very good.
Now there are a lot of people who are concerned about his accuracy, maybe his mobility isn't as good
Myself.
as yourself. So with Tennessee, and their defense wasn't great last year either. They lose Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman. Are you flooring it or pumping the brakes?
Now, they bring back Brew McCoy and Jabari Small, if I'm
They
not
do.
mistaken.
And Squirrel White.
And
Don't forget
those-
about Squirrel.
Squirrel. Top name in college football,
Top
by the way.
name.
We got to make sure that's clear. Me? Comes together quarterback, especially in the SEC. Pump the brakes, folks.
Yeah.
I know he's got a great arm. Let's see it in pads. Let's see him throw an accurate football. I know that's an ironic thing to say when I was so high on Anthony Richardson last year. But people don't understand the legs that Anthony Richardson has don't just go to Joe Milton because he's got a strong arm.
Right.
I mean, Anthony Richardson is going to be able to barrel through guys for the Colts as an NFL quarterback in his first year. You know what he can't do? Or what I'm saying is Joe Milton can't do that.
Right.
I mean, he's a guy who will get sacked in the pocket more than expected. He's going to have, I'm sure, 3 to 4 throws this year that are going to go viral on Twitter. That's cool and all. But for me, I see Tennessee as a 7-5, 6-6 team.
Interesting.
Maybe even 5-7.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Not only are you're slamming on the
I don't even really fully
the
believe in their.
airbags are deploying.
I don't fully believe in their quarterback, or not their quarterback, but their coach, Josh Heupel. I thought he shouldn't have gotten the job. I think that he did a bad job with UCF after Scott Frost. I think this is a team that we're going to look back on and go, oh, wow, wasn't that 1 year so magical? And then it all comes crashing
It
down.
is kind of weird how he ended up being 10 times better than Scott Frost, the guy who actually took UCF to winning New Year's Six Bowls.
How was Josh Heupel better than Scott Frost?
No, I'm saying, well, he is at his next destination.
Yes, at his next. If you make it a next destination,
Yes.
Yes.
Scott Frost was terrible.
he was absolutely awful in
Didn't
Nebraska.
make a single bowl game in 4
That aspect of it is true. However, let's let the Josh Heupel era continue. I think that the problem with Josh Heupel is he will inherit a program and then immediately just keeps it going down. The plane is landing for Tennessee. If Tennessee football is a stock, I'm hitting that hard sell.
Yeah. One more thing I'll just say is, for the first time in a very, very long time, we haven't even discussed these two teams yet. These are two teams that ruled the 2010s. They actually played, it's funny enough, they ruled the 2010s and played in the 2020 National Championship. It's Alabama and Ohio State. And it's crazy how, at least from a public perspective, those two teams have been kind of slept on this year. And so those are two teams that I think, they're going to have a lot to prove. They both have a lot to prove. I mean, Alabama just lost to Tennessee last year for the first time in like 15 years. Ohio State's lost 2 straight to Michigan since like the late 90s, right? I mean, both of those teams, it's kind of do or die for them. And it'll be interesting to see how that goes because they could really mess up that playoff that you have up there.
They can, but you want to know what their problem is?
What's their problem?
Starts with a Q, ends with a B. Quarterback.
Well, they both don't even know who it's going to be yet. So.
That's right.
And we'll get into that. We'll get into more of that later.
We absolutely will.
I'm just so excited for this season to start and for my Buckeyes. This is the first year, basically ever since I've started following, because I started following at the beginning of the Urban Meyer era. This is the first year where we are genuinely getting slept on by the whole nation, basically, and everyone's kind of just penciling in Michigan right now. So it'll be a fantastic season. I think both of our teams are going to make the playoff, actually. I think Ohio State and Texas are both going to make it, and I hope and pray that they play each other.
2 or 3 matchup?
Or 1 and 4. It doesn't. I don't care what happens.
Buddy thinks Ohio State's going to be a 1 seed. It's probably going to be Texas at the 1, now that I think about it.
I don't really care who's the 1 seed or the 4 seed. It would just be awesome to see that. But
It would be great. You folks better look forward to that pod, I'll tell you what.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, it seems that... What's happening?
Oh my God. That was freaking wild, guys. For a little bit there, I was cold daily, and now all of a sudden I'm back to normal. And I was talking about college football, making predictions about Georgia and Texas and everything. That was just nuts, Jordan. I don't know what just happened.
People say it's fun to do a podcast with these guys. I don't. Okay.
Anyways, I want to get back to Joey's stuff. The best sport of all, baseball, MLB.
That's right.
Just wanted to talk a little bit since it's been a couple months since we've talked about baseball in general. It's been a couple months since this whole podcast has been around, but wanted to get you guys up to speed about what's going on with the MLB right now. The number one thing I feel like we have to talk about is why in the world are the Seattle Mariners leading the American League West? That division is freaking crazy with the Astros and the Rangers. You were talking about the Rangers months ago, when we talked about MLB on the podcast. Now they're a game back, just like the Astros are, of the Mariners. They have a quietly good lineup. I think nobody has really talked about them because they were hovering over 500. They were kind of around the Cubs record for a while there. But Jordan, I just want to know, do you think they'll actually finish it off this year? Do you think the Rangers are going to come back this last month of September?
The only thing that I don't know. I guess I'm going to say no, because if there's one thing I've learned over the last 7 seasons of baseball, is that the Houston Astros just always find a way. And I'm one of the few people who still thinks they're cheating somehow. That's because they swept the Cubs, and I was just angry about that. But
I have to agree.
Yeah. But no, I think the Astros, because the Mariners are peaking now. We've still got about 30 games left. I don't know that they'll be able to keep up this pace for the next 30 games. The Astros really haven't had a part of the season where they've gone on a huge streak like that. Like, they've just been consistently winning. And the Rangers had a streak where they were just going nuts winning games, but then recently they just lost 9 in a row. So I'm scared of the Rangers. I think they'll probably end up finishing 3rd, which probably will still mean a playoff appearance. But I think they'll probably end up finishing 3rd, and I really just think that the Astros are that team. And Jose Altuve just hit for the cycle again. He's 33 years old. Like, seriously, like, this just isn't fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
It's almost like they're cheating. It's funny. But I wanted to look at, while you were talking about that, I wanted to look at the Mariners' schedule here. And they're in the middle of a series with the Athletics. They're about to play the Mets this weekend. They got the Reds. Then they travel to Tampa Bay. And then they host the Angels. Now, here's where it starts to get rough towards the end. They travel to Texas to play the Rangers for a 3-game series to finish the year. They host the Astros, host the Rangers. And that'll be an exciting finish in that division, needless to say. I don't know if the Mariners are going to do it, but their schedule, I would say, favors it these next couple weeks to at least hang on for that last little bit these next couple weeks.
Yeah.
Next up, I wanted to talk about, keep talking about underrated teams, the Orioles.
Yeah.
We were talking about them back in April when they were leading the American League for a little while, and they have hung on to that all year long. Granted, I guess I forgot to mention, the Rays had that crazy start to the year. They won like 13 games in a row to start the year. The Orioles were kind of just underneath them for the longest time, and nobody was really talking about it. I forgot that freaking Jack Flaherty is a Baltimore Oriole right now.
Oh, so great.
At the trade deadline, when the Cardinals, which that's something else I want to talk about, but when the Cardinals had to give away all their good players, actually, the Orioles picked him up, and he's actually been a fairly decent starter for them since then. Is it surprising to you that the Orioles have kind of launched into that lead into that division over the Rays? Did you really think that the Rays were going to keep it up at the start of the year or not? I don't know. I just want to know your thoughts, I guess, in general on the Orioles, Jay Cruz.
Yeah, I am surprised. And my brother somehow is an Orioles fan, so this is the best season he's ever experienced in his life.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they're leading the American League by as much as they are and had this fantastic season. I'm not surprised that they're in the playoff hunt because they were last year when they went on that ridiculous, I think it was a 12-game winning streak or something like that. And yeah, I am really surprised. I think they made a good move with Flaherty at the deadline. They kind of remind me of when the 2015 Cubs, a team that finished the season before a little bit better than expected and then are just exploding onto the scene. This year they're really young, they're really exciting. Everyone they bring up is just contributes from the moment they get to the major league level.
And honestly, their best player in their organization isn't even up. Jackson Holiday, Matt Holiday's.
We've been talking about him for years.
Yeah,
I feel like.
Matt Holiday's younger son. The fact that he is still waiting in the wings and they're this good, that's just not fair.
Right.
That's not fair. I mean, it's an incredible story, and it's a team who's sucked for a really, really long time. Probably, I think, basically Edwin Encarnacion's game-winning walk-off in that wild card series in 2016 send the Orioles down a spiral for the last 6 seasons, and they're back. It's clear to say that they're back. They're at the 1 seed in the American League right now, I believe. So it's so fun to watch.
And you mentioned, I mean, they've sucked the past, was it 5 or 6 years?
Yeah.
But they've had like the #1 farm system for years now. I feel like it just had to come at some point for them. And everyone talks about Adley Rushman, but some of their other younger guys are just coming onto the scene, sprouting into the big leagues. Next thing I want to talk about, Shohei Ohtani. Everyone talks about Shohei Ohtani. But I do have to just bring up the question, and I almost bring it up to anybody that just keeps up with baseball now. Now that he's hurt, he's still gonna play DH this year, but they're obviously not gonna get the innings from him anymore. Did the Angels fail Shohei Ohtani this year? Did they fail him in years past? Just his whole tenure? Is it the Angels' fault? Do you blame the Angels? And I guess more specifically, do you hate the Angels' move to not give him away at the deadline?
In hindsight, yeah, obviously, but they went all in at the deadline, and I think at the time, the baseball community as a whole was pretty behind that move. I mean, when you got Trout and Shohei, Trout was still injured then, but we knew he was going to come back. At the time, it looked like a really good move. But everyone that they got, particularly Lucas Giolito, have been cursed by wearing that Angels uniform. And it is really sad to see because, I can only imagine living out in Los Angeles, being an Angels fan, having to deal with the Dodgers being as good as they are every year. All your best friends are probably Dodgers fans. But you do have the 2 best players in the league. They finally start to show some life middle of the season. Trout's coming back. Shohei's the best player in baseball. And you go all into the deadline, something you haven't experienced in almost a decade, and the team plays worse because of it. And it's just, there's nothing else to say other than they're cursed. They really are just cursed right now. They've ruined everything that they touch.
So, would you rather be a White Sox fan right now or an Angels fan right now?
Angels fan because I don't want to get assaulted when I go to my favorite team's home games. So that would probably be my guess. But no, from a baseball standpoint, I mean, the White Sox at the very least, they failed as well. But at the very least, in this window that they've had of being pretty good for a while until this year, they at least made the playoffs a couple of times. The Angels can't say that. I'm a big fan of Luis Robert. They have him under contract right now on a pretty cheap deal. So I think both teams are about to go into a rebuild probably. The White Sox rebuild, and they also have a good farm system now with the talent that they give away, including Lucas Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez to the Angels. Because of that, they're gonna get back to being good a lot sooner than the Angels are. They've really royally screwed themselves for years to come. The Angels will be probably just as bad, if not worse, than the Athletics are this year, probably in 3 or 4 years.
Totally.
Because they have no farm system.
I totally agree.
Zero farm system.
Yeah.
It's a shame. It's really a shame.
I don't know how much of a fan all our viewers are of baseball and if they're fans of specific teams, but if you're like me, you see all these jersey swaps with Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah.
If you're a Cubs fan like me.
Yeah.
Every team gets to do that this year, and just imagine what if Shohei was with us? What if the greatest baseball player that ever lived ends up with our team next year?
Yeah.
Except the Angels. They're
Right.
the only team that it's almost a guarantee that he's not going to end up with.
No.
And I just feel like that's so sad. And now, we didn't even mention it. Mike Trout is injured too.
Yeah.
Does Mike Trout request a trade from the Angels? With Shohei being gone, why would he want to stay with Los Angeles? With Los Angeles Angels?
Yeah. The only reason I could see him staying with them is just his personality, his stubbornness to just want to be with the same organization, the same people. You don't gotta move your family, nothing like that. I mean, yeah, if I were him, I'd want to get out of there because even with him, they're still gonna suck. I mean, they have for the last 7-8 years. So I feel bad for him. I feel bad for him, and for Shohei, but if I were to push back on the Shohei love just a little bit, it's kind of the Aaron Judge thing too. They both seem to have a little injury problem every single year to some extent. Now, most guys do, but when you're the best player really in Major League Baseball, and you're that much of a liability, and now he did some with his UCL, like he tore his UCL or something, or strained it or something. That's going to lower his value from a contract standpoint. And so, but for me as a baseball fan though, that might end up being a good thing because more teams are going to be in the mix now. And maybe if you're a team like the Yankees or the Mets or the Dodgers, you're not going to want to pay $60 million a year. So a team maybe like the Mariners or maybe the Marlins, who are kind of on the up and up, the Diamondbacks, might be able to get into the sweepstakes because it'll be less money to pay for a guy like Shohei.
I always imagined at the trade deadline that the Orioles might be a pretty good. They might be high up there in the sweepstakes for Shohei, I guess is what I was trying to say. But and then just in general, I want to mention how much better the game of baseball is this year. I didn't write notes on it, but I was just kind of thinking about it, I guess.
Yeah.
The new rule changes, it's such a much faster pace of play.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Shohei, he's better for the game. And I know me and you have talked recently, last semester. When Shohei was in town to play the St. Louis Cardinals, you were immediately like, I have to go see Shohei play. I mean, we're not alone in that. Everybody in America wants to go see Shohei play. Ticket sales have risen since Shohei has been as good as he is.
Yeah.
He's just the perfect thing to have happened to the game of baseball. And I love it. I love that the game of baseball is expanding and just getting better. Has gotten so much better this year in terms of its pace and then just its stars in general with Ronald Acuna and Shohei and obviously Freddie Freeman and then our Cubs, Cody Bellinger, just everybody in general. I just love baseball. I love baseball, dude.
It's been great, and it helps as we transition a little bit that our Cubs have been They've been amazing. I mean, I haven't felt this happy about the team since like the 2017 NLCS or NLDS when we beat the Nationals. I don't know if you remember that or not. I'm sure you do. And one more thing, I guess, on the pitch clock. I may have mentioned it last year. I was really concerned as a diehard baseball fan, a guy who's been watching it even before all these rule changes. I never really cared for the rule changes at first, but I don't even notice it anymore. From the very beginning, you just get so invested in the game and the outcome that you don't really care about the pitch clock. And it's not like guys are always having violations. I mean, there may be one or two a game, if that. I don't even know if I've been probably 8 or 9 games. I think I can only remember having maybe once or twice. Yeah. So it really hasn't changed the flow of the game at all. It's a lot smoother. Games are going a lot faster, and with a 162 game season, games shouldn't be lasting the same amount as football games do when they're only 16 games a year or something or other. But yeah, our Cubs in particular have been so, I guess, resilient is the way to put it, because there were so many times during the season where I threw in the towel. I'll admit I gave up on the team because they showed no signs that I shouldn't give up on them. And the way that they've come back and inserted themselves into the playoff race, they're currently in the wild card. The Brewers are still somehow winning games. I'm not convinced they're a good team, but you gotta tip your cap, I guess. They just continue to win, and that's really all that matters at the end of the day. Doesn't matter if you win by 1 or 100. But yeah, the National League wild card race is crazy. Even more than the American League, I would say, because there's 5 or 6 teams who are all battling for that last spot. It's going to be one heck of an MLB season down the stretch, and I can't wait to continue to talk about it on this podcast, because it's going to be great.
Yeah, oh my God. And for some of our new viewers out there, me and Jordan are Chicago Cubs fans. We're going to have a Cubs dedicated rant every episode, at least until the season is ending, because I know me and Jordan are just ecstatic about how they have been playing, at least this past month. So I just wanted to mention a couple things about the Cubs. I don't know how much you've seen their expected win-loss record, but it has been 4 to 5 games higher than what their actual win-losses record been for most of the season. I don't know how expected win-loss actually really works, but does that just mean we've had just a lot of bad luck? Does that mean clutch situations? I think that's pretty telling of how much better this team is
than their win-loss record, of course. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what expected win-loss record is supposed to do. But yeah, I just wanted to know, just in general, where do you think these Cubs are going to end up at the end of the season? Do you think they're going to win the division, maybe second wild card where they're at right now, I believe? Where does Jordan Cruz believe the Chicago Cubs will be at by the end of the year?
I want to say they should win the division, but a lot of that is predicated on Milwaukee, when they're not playing us, losing games, and it seems like that's just impossible right now. They've continued, kind of like the Rangers I mentioned, the Rangers I mentioned earlier, how they were just consistently winning, or the Orioles, they're just consistently winning games. They're winning 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4, and they do that 4 or 5 series in a row. That's 6 or 7 games above 500. They're now 17 games above 500, which just sounds ridiculous coming out of that mouth right now. I expect the Cubs to make the playoffs. I really do, in any way, shape, or form. To be honest, I would almost rather, in terms of my stress levels, I don't want this, but if they do end up making the playoffs as a 6 seed, I think that actually benefits us better than being a 4 or 5 seed, because our opponent would be the Brewers in that case, who, again, I don't think they're that good. They have a great pitching staff. Offensively, they're just terrible. They are terrible offensively. If you look at all the stats, all the metrics, they are really bad offensively. Christian Yelich is their best player by far. He's having a resurgent year, which has been huge for them. But I genuinely think the Cubs are the best team in the division, and I don't know that we match up well with a team like Philadelphia, though. I mean, this year they swept us both times this year, and of course, having Kyle Schwarber go up against, and Castellanos going up against us in the playoffs is just a feeling that I don't want to experience. I really like the Phillies. I think they're a really, really good team who has a chance to go back to the World Series. So that is kind of where my head's at. I would rather not experience a lot of stress toward the end of the year, maybe lock up that 4 or 5 spot early. But if you're asking me if I could handpick where we end up, it would be either that winning the division as a 3 seed, or be the 6 seed to face our division winner, who I don't think is really that good.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I don't really know if I believe in the Brewers or not. It's been the rotation that's carried them all season long.
Yeah.
Although they just dropped a bomb on us last night in the first inning.
Yeah.
Which, if you're listening to this on Wednesday, today is Tuesday when we're filming this. They're actually playing right now against the Brewers. I believe they're up 1-0. But anyways, I believe that the Cubs will probably end up in that 6 spot. I don't know if I've ever really believed that they would win the division, but I am in the same boat as you, as that they have the talent, at least in terms of their lineup. If everybody is at their A game for a whole week, I think their record is better than the Brewers, if that makes any sense. I feel that was probably a really weird way to put it, but I mentioned this to you earlier in the season. I feel like the Brewers are going to win the division, and the Cubs will end up as the 6th wildcard spot. But the Cubs' chances of getting to the NLCS or perhaps even World Series are higher than the Brewers, because I don't see them having a big run against teams like the Braves or even the Phillies, for that matter. I feel like whoever the Phillies are going to face, they're going to end up upsetting.
Crush them.
I could see the Phillies going on another run this year as a wild card team. They can never win the division, but they'll always make a run as a wild card.
Mm-hmm.
We should give props to Cody Bellinger.
Oh yeah,
He was my favorite offseason signing, and I say that honestly, and I don't say that as like I do all along. I did not see him batting around 320 at this point in the season, doing as well as he's done with runners in scoring position, because that was our big thing at the beginning of the year. We could not get guys home. And after he missed a month with injury, which really hurt the team, he's come back and he was kind of getting lucky at first. Like when he first came back, he was getting a lot of blooper base hits, and we're like, this probably isn't going to last very long. Like, he's,
he brought his power back.
He hasn't gotten any better. Like, he's kind of the same guy he was last year, and then all of a sudden he started raking, putting balls in the gaps. He started doing this like little 2-strike swing where he kind of just, they're always shifted on him a little bit, so he kind of just punches it the other way, and it's worked really well for him. So he's definitely the Cubs MVP of this season by far. And having a guy like him in a playoff series is so key. You have a guy who's been there before. He's won a World Series, beat us a couple times, or beat us once in the playoffs in 2017. So yeah, he's been incredible. There's nothing else I could really say.
And I feel like people have talked about this with the Cubs this year, but their defense, just in general, not their pitching staff, but their defensive play in the outfield and the infield has been outstanding this year. When you have Nico Horner and Dansby Swanson, who are double-digit in outs above average, that I don't know if they're. I'd like to actually see if there's another infield in the league that has two players with double-digit outs above average.
Yeah.
I don't think there's very many players in general. Now, when you have two of them on the infield, that's just nuts. Just freaking nuts.
Whenever we put out the infield of, shout out to Nick Madrigal too, by the way. Nick Madrigal at third base, Swanson short, Horner second, and Cody Bellinger at first. That's another thing that Cody Bellinger has really stabilized that first base position because it was a problem all year until we started putting him there. And again, we can go on about MVPs of the season, but Mike Talkman coming out of nowhere, being our constant leadoff guy, him going to center, because that's where the only place he can play really, puts Belly at first, and he has a lot of experience there, and he's been great. That is one of the better defensive infields in baseball. And let's say in the playoffs we face like a guy like Corbin Burns, for example, in the first round. We're going to have Talkman in the lineup, lefty, hitting in center, Bellinger at first base against a team like the Brewers, who is probably going to be low scoring. Those little things on the defensive end make so much of a difference.
And getting Candelario, and I'm going to try to wrap this up because we've been going on.
Yeah,
for
we
a while,
could do a whole 3-hour podcast about this.
Getting Candelario at the trade deadline really fixes up some of the, because when you put Bellinger, who has a Gold Glove as a center fielder at first base, that's just a big advantage that you're just missing out on.
Yeah.
Mike Talkman really covered that up for the longest time. I love Mike Talkman, but I don't know if he's going to be able to keep it up into the playoffs. So having Candelario, who can play first base and even third base, lets us keep Cody in center field, and then have Mike Talkman as a left fielder when Ian Happen needs a day off, or Seiya Suzuki, who's been slumping at least this year for most of the season. I just love the move. I don't even know if we really, really, really needed it, but I love the move at the trade deadline. So, that was our Cubs rant for the week. That was our MLB rant for the week.
Let's throw it back to all three of us. We'll wrap things up.
And we're back, folks. Folks, it's been a long night. We are now it's now 2 a.m. Just kidding, that's a lie. But nevertheless, it's been an absolute very, very, very long process, and we're so happy to do it. So, folks, if you could say this one more time, what did we learn this week in the world of sports? Joey, I'd like to have you start what you learned this week. I mean, what do you think?
I just thought I thought of this segment because I just wanted to know exactly what new thing all of us just recently figured out, or we're like, oh my God, I'm just now realizing this mid-season of whatever is happening. Yeah. So the thing this week that I'm realizing is that the Milwaukee Brewers in the MLB are the luckiest team in baseball. They caught the Rangers at the worst slump that they're going to have this season. And the Cubs probably, I don't know, we've been kind of slumping for a little while against these bad teams. Our win-loss record doesn't really show it because we've been winning these series. And then they played the freaking Twins, who, I mean, they're going to make the playoffs, they're going to win that division, but I don't know if I really believe in them. Yeah. The Milwaukee Brewers, luckiest team in the MLB.
Yeah, I agree. The thing I learned this week, and just the message for the people at home, is it's difficult to set a podcast up by yourself. All kidding aside, we have done a lot of work, and it's been great to work with these guys over the last year. I mean, last year, I don't know if there's been anyone who's watched every single episode of the pod, but I wasn't here at the beginning of last year. And these guys made it so easy to transition in, and now it's just us three this new season. And tonight kind of sucked. Took a long time, but this will be the best season of the Inside Sports podcast.
Absolutely will.
That you guys will ever see. The thing I learned in sports this week is that, and this, everyone kind of already knew this, but coordinators and play callers are everything, in football in particular. And I want to transition this to a specific team that this is the best example of this. A team that I want to assign Joey for the college football season. I discussed it with Cole. We both think this is perfect based on his personality, you know, how the team's been the last few years, kind of up and down. not really up and down, but for their standards it is. It's
Yes.
the Clemson Tigers. And one thing that people may not remember that great run Clemson had of like 4 or 5 years in a row, 6 years in a row.
Oh, yeah,
So
when they were basically winning
making
every
the
title.
playoff. The ACC was terrible, but they were making the playoff. They were winning playoff games,
Mhm.
sometimes with the help of the refs. And one thing that people don't realize is that they had the same coordinators until Brent Venables left.
That's right.
They had the same coordinators up until I think 2020 or 2019, and they were incredible because of it. And look what happened the last couple of years. Now that they've decided to change up their coordinators, and not that they decided to do that, if they had their way, they probably would have kept them. But guys like Brent Venables took jobs at Oklahoma, and their defense in a couple of games, particularly against Wake Forest, suffered last year because of it. And so that's the thing that it's kind of really hit me in thinking about how this college football season is going to go. Coordinators mean everything. And I think for a team like Clemson, who's getting, even though it's Garrett Riley, he's still new, right? Alabama's got 2 new coordinators. Ohio State just got a new defensive coordinator last year. Look how that went for them.
Mhm.
There's growing pains, and so coordinators are the most important thing in football, in my opinion.
I think that's right. And since we just got done talking about Joey's new favorite team, the Clemson Tigers, I have
Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun.
Oh, gosh.
That was crazy, folks. We did not stand for that. Jay Cruz, I want to talk about your favorite team because the thing I learned this week is that Ohio State is not confident in their quarterback. I mean, we've been hearing rumors this whole year about Devin Brown or Kyle McCord, and if you're an Ohio State fan, you want to tell yourself, oh, it's because they're both so good, we can't make up our mind. If one of them was so good, the other one would be out of the discussion.
Right.
And the thing is, I think that by the end of the season, it's Devin Brown, but you guys have just named Kyle McCord your starting quarterback, but Devin Brown will be playing in some of those games, and that's why I personally don't have Ohio State in my college football playoff, is because just you don't know what's going on at quarterback. I mean, what's going on, Jay Cruz? I mean, I thought Ohio State was this, oh my God, absolutely perfect team. Now all of a sudden, C.J. Stroud's gone.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
I think I know exactly what's going on, and it's something that happens every year in a lot of different programs. Same thing happened in Michigan last year, right? Now, Kyle McCord wasn't the starter last year, but he's been in this system now 3 years. He's a junior. Devin Brown's a sophomore. Everything that we've been hearing out of camp is that Devin Brown is the better player.
Mhm.
In both of their scrimmages that they had, offense versus defense, Devin Brown graded out higher in both of those scrimmages. He's more athletic. Basically, everything points to the signs that Devin Brown should probably be the starter.
Mm-hmm.
But since Kyle McCord's been there, he's been in the system. Happened to Clemson last year. Cade Klubnik was probably always the better fit for Clemson, but because DJ had been there for longer, and so on and so forth. You guys get what I'm saying, right? I think that's what's happening here. I really think Devin Brown is the real deal.
That being said,
based on things that I've said.
Do you fully believe they'll make the playoff?
Yeah, because I think
Really?
by the Notre Dame game, I think Ryan Day will be forced to, and I don't like that this is happening at all. I think he's being stubborn for no reason. By the Notre Dame game, I think Devin Brown will be the starter, and Ryan Day will finally come out and just say that he's better than Kyle McCord. And another reason he probably did this was because he didn't want Kyle McCord to transfer, which is, I think, exactly the case here. So I don't know. I don't like it. I really don't like it. We did the same thing with Cardale Jones and JT Barrett in 2015. We did the QB hokey pokey, put one guy in, take one guy up, put one guy in, and it didn't work. And then finally they came up with JT Barrett, but we lost that game to Michigan State, if you remember the windmill kick.
Mm-hmm.
We lost that game because JT just wasn't himself anymore because he didn't get that full control in the off season, and so yeah.
Me personally, if you already got a quarterback situation, you've got a coach that was born on third plate, thought he hit a home run. I don't see it this year for Ohio State.
No,
that's what I learned this week.
Okay.
With that being said, folks, that's it for the Every Different Kind of Shirt podcast. My fault. The Inside Sports podcast with the DE capitalized. We thank you so much for joining us. I'm Cole. It's Joey. It's Jordan. It's your 3 favorite boys on the planet. You already know it. Thanks so much for watching.